Hi guys, my name is Ella and today's video is 6 things every Muslim needs to know. Number 1, Hamas, the jihadist and Palestinian nationalist terrorist group that carried out the October 7th massacre in the state of Israel, is also the democratically elected government of Gaza that the Palestinians voted into power in 2006, and it has a civil service of 40,000 Palestinian nationalists. But Hamas originally formed as the Gazan Palestinian branch of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood in 1986, and its main goals were to become the main organization opposing Israel politically, militarily, and religiously. In its founding charter, there are 6 sections called articles, and that detail their hatred of the Jewish people, their homeland, and their intent to carry out a genocide of the Jews in the name of Allah and jihad. It explicitly states its goals are to wage jihad against the Jews and the state of Israel, to conquer and destroy the state and its people, and impose an Islamic state or Muslim caliphate, Sharia law, and return the Palestinians to that land. That is explicitly stated in Hamas's founding charter. And these are the people that the Palestinians voted into power in 2006 and who carried out the October 7th massacre, as I mentioned earlier. It's clear from the 15 additional nationalist and jihadist terrorist organizations that are affiliated with and or collaborating with Hamas in their terrorist activities from their bases in Gaza, and from the messaging that was on display in the pro-Palestine marches after the October 7th massacre, that the support for the Palestinians and their government is overwhelmingly strong, even though what Hamas and its affiliates stand for is the same as what Adolf Hitler and the Nazis stood for. Indeed, Hamas's founding charter draws on resources that were favoured by Adolf Hitler when he was shoring up hate towards the Jews in Nazi Germany, ahead of the execution of Adolf Hitler's final solution against the Jews in the 1930s and early 1940s. So, with that in mind, why should the Jews and the State of Israel make a peace deal, or one that would allow the Palestinians equal citizenship in Israel, or a Palestinian state on Israel's doorstep, when they elected Hamas into power, and Hamas has not stopped launching rockets at Israel, sending male and female martyrs across the Israeli borders into Israel, and generally terrorizing Israelis since it was formed in 1988. Since Hamas was formed in 1988. And as recently as October, obviously it carried out the massacre, which killed 1,200 Israelis and foreign nationals in the state. It took 244 hostages, with 150 still in captivity. It mutilated children in front of their parents, and Hamas mutilated parents in front of their children, and did other things that are too disturbing to detail here. So that's the first thing that the Muslims need to know. Hamas was not just a terrorist organization with the same goal that Adolf Hitler had, but it was also the democratically elected government in Gaza, the Palestinian territory. The second thing that Muslims need to know is that the Jewish people are human beings too, just as the Palestinians are. So when we see Palestinian children being killed, ordinary decent Jewish people naturally feel sad about that. And this was evident from the number of Jews for Palestine groups in the pro-Palestine marches that followed the October massacre in October and November and December. In the UK, those marches are still going on. But when Palestinians, Hamas, and their supporters around the world see or hear of Jewish children and their mothers being mutilated, tortured, raped, and massacred by their own government of Gaza, they don't feel sad. Instead, they celebrate it as a, quotes, success, unquotes, that the jihad and the global intifada is succeeding. They avoid empathizing with the Israelis, who have had to live with terrorists targeting them for annihilation in their own land every year for the last 75 years. And that's an issue because the Jewish state and the two Palestinian territories are neighbours, with the two territories effectively sandwiching the state of Israel with no land separating them at all. So the stakes are very high for the Israelis. You know, think of it like this. Would you want people who voted, say, an Islamophobic terrorist organisation into power that subsequently siphons off all funds intended for the people into their own pockets in order to fund their jihad against, say, Saudi Arabia that happen to be next door to you? You know, would you want those people living next door to you? And that's the situation for the Israelis. They have people living next door to them that frequently breach the Israeli borders, send martyrs in to detonate suicide bombs, and frequently launch rockets from Gaza into Israel, and various other things. The third thing that Muslims need to know is regarding the land that the Palestinian nationalists want for themselves. This land is the state of Israel, and the name Israel being the name the land and its surrounding areas were called in biblical times, as demonstrated in the Jewish Bible, the Christian Bible, and the Quran. It came to be called the State of Israel because the British, having helped conquer the Ottoman Empire, who were ruling it when it was called Israel Palestine, and the United Nations, in conjunction with the British, partitioned the land into three parts in 1947. At that time, the land was being ruled by the British under the British Mandate for Palestine. And it was doing that with the permission of the League of Nations, which then became the United Nations. So the United Nations partitioned the land into three parts in 1947 and gave one part to the Jews and two parts to the Palestinians. One of the portions that were given to the Palestinians, the West Bank, was historically called Judea and Samaria, with Judea being the former Jewish northern Jewish kingdom of Judea. That's what it was called in antiquity, and Samaria being the southern Jewish kingdom. Samaria also includes Bethlehem, where Jesus is said to have been born. So that's a place of holy significance to Christians and Muslims. So the Jews made a state, a country and a national homeland for the Jewish people out of their single piece of land, which had their own national language of Hebrew on it, and, apologies just for that break, had their own national language of Hebrew on it, and naturally they named it Israel. The Jews can trace their ethnic, cultural, genetic and religious heritage right back to antiquity in the years written about in the Jewish, Christian and Muslim Bibles, when the land of Israel was a united Jewish kingdom, followed by two separate Jewish kingdoms that I just mentioned, and this all was about 4,000 years ago. But the Palestinians, they were given their portions of land by the UN in 1947 so that they too could create a nation state, a country and a homeland for their people. But they have refused to accept the deal that was made and the new reality that the British and the United Nations ushered in by partitioning the land. Instead, the Palestinians vowed to annihilate the Jews and their homeland, acting in furtherance, that they've acted in furtherance of that vow ever since. To this day, the two pieces of land given to the Palestinians are called the Palestinian territories of the West Bank and Gaza. The Palestinians don't have their own language and never have, as far as the absence of evidence in the Bible, in the fields of archaeology and history go. They don't have a cultural, religious and archaeological history like the people of Israel have, the Jews. The Palestinians never created their own country, as I mentioned, but the Palestinian nationalists want the state of Israel's land as their own country in order to pick up where the Muslim Caliphate Umar from Arabia left off after he conquered Jerusalem, the holy city in the province of Judea that became Syria Palestine under the Romans, and which Israelis and Palestinians both claim as their capital city today, but which has what's called international status in the international community, so that means that it's protected and it belongs to no one. It belongs to everybody and no one, if that makes sense. It doesn't belong to the Palestinians and it doesn't belong to the Jews. So hundreds of years later, the Muslims ruled Syria, Palestine for hundreds of years until the Ottomans, until the British and her allies helped conquer the Ottoman Empire's rule, and the land fell back into Christian hands. So it had previously been in Christian hands under the Romans in the 1st century, and it changed different hands, went into the hands of the Jews, the Greeks, the Assyrians, and then the Muslims, then back to the Christians, and now it's in the hands of the Jews. So the Palestinian nationalists and jihadists and their supporters have only started their jihad against Israel and the Jews since the British left Palestine and the State of Israel declared its independence, both which happened in 1948. So that's the second thing that the Muslims need to know, is that the land that the Palestinians want for themselves belongs to the State of Israel, and Jewish rule over the land can be traced back to times of antiquity. That's written about in all of our Bibles, the Jewish Bible, Christian Bible, and the Muslim Bible. And so their presence has been there in that land, for the land that's now their homeland, for 4,000 years. Obviously with patches of, there's been pretty much a constant presence throughout the 4,000 years. Many Jews emigrated out, they were expelled out or exiled out. They had to leave the land for various reasons, similar to the ones now. But there were some Jews always remained, and then Jews always came back to the land. And we know that they've been there because the evidence proving that they were there, and that the Bible, the Old Testament, is as it says it is. In other words, that land was as it was because archaeological evidence has been found to prove it. The fourth thing that the Muslims need to know is that the only way for ordinary decent Palestinians to secure a state or country of their own is to reject Hamas and all the affiliated jihadis and nationalists, because their role is a toxic one. They fundamentally reject all peace attempts, and this is explicitly stated in Hamas's founding charter. They fundamentally reject all attempts of peace. They say those peace conferences and so on, they're just vanity projects. They're not interested, they will never entertain them. It says that in Hamas's founding charter. So there can never be peace and a country called Palestine while such links to terrorist jihadis and nationalists dictate the future of the Palestinian territories. And finally, the fifth thing that Muslims need to know is that the martyrs that Hamas and its affiliates send into Israel is part of the reason why Gazan and West Bank Palestinians feel they're under occupation from Israel. Because of the martyrs, Israel has no choice but to meticulously police and secure its borders to prevent as many martyrs from killing Israelis as possible. The other reason is the regular rockets and missiles being launched into Israel by the Hamas and its affiliates. And again, this makes it essential for Israel to maintain a strong security footing in the areas of the territories that are the Palestinians and which Hamas uses as its base to target Israel from. So that fifth thing is why it feels as though the Palestinians are under occupation, because of Hamas and its affiliates, because of the jihad, because of the jihadis and the martyrs. The Israeli borders are constantly being breached, as we saw on October 7th. They're constantly being breached, and suicide bombs are being detonated in Israel in pursuit of this jihad. So those are the 5 things every Muslim should know about the Israel-Palestine conflict and the barriers to peace and a state for the Palestinians. I hope you found this video to be informative. If you have any comments, please put them in the comments section. They'll always create an interesting dialogue. If you've enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to my channel. and that way I can make more videos. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.